I tried to survive on my own, working part-time, borrowing, saving every dollar just to stay in school. For the first 2 years, I juggled classes with jobs, waiting tables at a restaurant, babysitting for neighbors, even scrubbing mall floors during overnight shifts. I believed that if I endured long enough, one day my parents would recognize my efforts and finally offer support. But reality was harsher than I ever imagined. Tuition and living costs were overwhelming, and the debts piled higher each semester. By the end of my second year, I was forced to do the one thing that shattered me: submit my withdrawal form. I left the dorm in silence, carrying nothing but an old suitcase and the crushing sense that every door had slammed shut in my face. Meanwhile, Sophia lived in a different world. My parents spared nothing for her. When she was accepted into an MBA program in New York, they immediately paid her full tuition, rented her a luxury apartment in Manhattan, bought her an expensive car to get around, and sent her a generous monthly allowance. Every weekend, my mother boasted to her friends that Sophia is the pride of the family, while my father could hardly contain his pride when speaking about the future heir of the Carter Hotel chain. As for me, my name was rarely spoken. At family gatherings, whenever someone asked what I was doing, my father would dismissively answer, "She's still wandering around, nothing worth mentioning." Oh, I must have asked myself 1,000 times, why me? Why am I not valued the way Sophia is? What did I do wrong to be treated like an outsider in my own family? Through my entire childhood and into my adult years, I never received an answer. I only knew one thing. Inside the Carter house, the place that should have been my safe haven, I never once felt like I truly belonged. Those injustices slowly carved a lasting pain into me, but they also became a silent source of strength. I swore that one day I would prove them wrong, that my career was not filthy, and that my worth would never be defined by their contempt. But at that time, I was only a 20-year-old girl, forced to pack away her dreams and step into the world with empty hands. And it was in that darkness that I began the first steps of my own journey toward independence. When I dragged my old suitcase out of the dorm in my sophomore year, I knew I would never return to my parents' house in the Boston suburbs. I had already endured enough cold stares, dismissive words, and the feeling of being treated as a burden. I chose to go in a different direction, even though that direction offered nothing certain except a cramped rental room and the little money I earned from manual jobs. I worked as a waitress at a small Italian restaurant near the city square, each shift running from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until midnight, my shirt drenched in sweat from rushing between tables. During the day, I took cleaning shifts at a shopping mall, pushing a heavy mop and breathing in chemical fumes that made me nauseous. Every paycheck barely covered rent, cheap meals, and a small payment toward my student debt. Some nights I sat curled up in that tiny room, the dim yellow light casting uneven shadows on the walls, asking myself if this was all my life was going to be. Yet life often takes its sharpest turns in the smallest moments. One day, while helping with a beach cleanup, a habit I had kept since high school, I came across a group of students testing a plastic recycling project. They used a small press to turn discarded plastic bottles into crude building materials. Curious, I joined in to lend a hand. By chance, a volunteer filmed the process and posted it on YouTube and TikTok with the caption, "The janitor girl helping turn trash plastic into building bricks." The video unexpectedly went viral, reaching hundreds of thousands of views in just a few days. I could hardly believe that the image of a tired girl with chemical stains on her clothes could make so many people pay attention to an environmental story. That moment sparked an idea in me. If one random clip could spread so widely, why couldn't I turn it into something real? I started learning how to film, edit, and create content. I launched a personal channel to talk about environmental issues in a way that felt simple and practical. I shared tips on easy recycling at home, explained why waste separation mattered, and showed how to turn kitchen scraps into fertilizer. At first, only a few dozen people followed, mostly old friends, but gradually the videos began to spread. I had nothing but sincerity and a genuine love for the environment, and perhaps that was exactly what reached people's hearts. After 2 years of persistence, my channel had gained hundreds of thousands of followers. I was invited to small green entrepreneurship seminars, and local schools began asking me to speak to their students. More importantly, I started to find a community that believed in the values I pursued. Many viewers messaged me to say they had changed their daily habits, started sorting their trash, reduced single-use plastics, or joined cleanup groups. Each message felt like a quiet encouragement, reminding me that the path I had chosen was not meaningless, even if my family still dismissed it as a filthy job. From creating content, I began to dream of something bigger, turning recycling ideas into a real business. At 24, together with a few like-minded friends, I founded Green Path Solutions, a startup dedicated to researching and producing building materials from recycled waste. In the beginning, we worked out of a rented garage using outdated machines that broke down constantly. I remember freezing winter nights when the whole team huddled together against the cold, experimenting with formulas while sipping instant coffee to stay awake. Little by little, the first bricks made from recycled plastic were born, sturdy enough to build a small wall. At first, GreenPath was just an unknown name, but with the support of the community, we started raising funds. I launched a crowdfunding campaign online telling my own story, from being rejected by my parents to building value out of waste. To my surprise, thousands of people contributed, not only because of the product, but because they saw in us a belief in a sustainable world. The money raised was enough to buy new equipment, rent a small workshop, and hire more workers. A year later, an environmental fund in Boston noticed our project and decided to invest. That was the turning point, transforming GreenPath from a fragile startup into a recognized company in the recycling industry. As the company grew, we secured contracts with several construction firms to supply recycled plastic materials. I began to earn a stable income, rented a comfortable apartment of my own, and for the first time in my life, I no longer had to worry about every single bill. I also made it a priority to hire young people who had faced hardships like I once did, giving them the chance to work in an environment built on respect and creativity. Watching them grow each day, I felt as though I was finally building the kind of family I had never truly had. Then, when GreenPath had finally become stable, an old thought returned. I remembered the unfinished dream, the college degree I was forced to abandon at 20. I realized it was time to close that wound. Not to make my parents proud. Not to prove anything to Sophia. I needed to finish it for myself. For the young woman who once cried in a tiny rented room, believing her life was already over. So, I reapplied to the university and registered to complete the credits I had left behind. Returning to campus, I was no longer the 19-year-old student I once had been. I was older, more grounded, with real-world experience and a career of my own. I sat in lecture halls listening to professors explain new technologies in the field, and I felt every cell in my body light up. I submitted research papers on recycled materials using data from my company and my thesis, and received high praise. My classmates saw me as an example, and my professors respected my perseverance. On the day I walked across the stage, I wasn't just Rachel Carter, the 27-year-old who graduated late. I was living proof that a detour can still lead you to the finish line, that no one has the right to decide the value of your life but you. I held the diploma in my hands, my heart racing, and in that moment I whispered to myself, "At last, I did it." That graduation day, I hoped it would be perfect, a milestone to close the chapter of hardship and open a new path forward. I organized a small celebration after the ceremony, renting a cozy restaurant by the Charles River, decorated simply with green and white ribbons, the colors I always associated with the environment and renewal. I wanted to invite the people who had walked beside me, friends, mentors, professors. And even though I felt conflicted deep inside, I still sent invitations to my parents and to Sophia. Part of me wanted to show them that despite everything, I had risen, that I had completed the very education they once ridiculed. Another part of me, fragile and hidden in my heart, still longed for a small acknowledgement, a nod of recognition from them. Guests filled the room, each one smiling and congratulating me. Old friends from my first college, colleagues from GreenPath, and even the professor who had guided me through research all raised their glasses in my honor. In that moment, I felt I truly had another kind of family, people who believed in me and in my worth. But then when my parents walked in, the atmosphere shifted instantly. My father, still in his immaculate suit, carried himself with the grand posture of a hotel magnate. My mother, draped in an expensive coat, scanned the room with cold, sharp eyes as though this space belonged to her. And Sophia, my sister, arrived like the star of the evening in a glamorous dress, her perfect smile gleaming, her self-assurance radiating with the arrogance that had been nurtured all her life. At first, I tried to keep things cordial. I walked up to greet them, smiled, and thanked them for coming. My mother nodded dismissively. My father only gave a curt grunt, and Sophia hugged me with a chill so obvious it felt more like duty than affection. I was used to it. I turned back to my friends, letting them take seats at the central table, the very spot I had wanted to save for myself and my professors. But even as I tried to ignore them, I couldn't have predicted how quickly the cruelty would arrive. While the dinner was underway and everyone was lifting their glasses, my father suddenly stood. He cleared his throat, commanding the attention of the room. I thought he was about to say a few words of congratulations for his daughter's graduation, as any parent would. Instead, each word fell like a cold blade. I want to take this occasion to make it clear to our family and relatives that Rachel will not have any share of the Carter family estate. All of our assets, the hotels, and the reputation we've built over generations will be handed down to Sophia. She is the one truly worthy of carrying on this legacy. The room froze. I sat in shock, my glass trembling in my hand. I could hear my own breathing quicken as if the world around me was fading away. I tried to tell myself I had misheard, that perhaps he would follow up with words of pride for me. But then my mother rose, her tone sharp and cold as she added, "Rachel, you already have your own career, your own company, a good income. Sophia is the one who needs support. It's only natural. We just want things to be fair." I didn't even have time to respond before my father gave a cold laugh, shook his head, and said something I will never forget. The truth is, we never believed in that so-called career you're chasing. A filthy career, a dirty job dealing with trash, something no one in the Carter family would ever want to be associated with. The room fell into silence for a few seconds, and then the murmurs began. I saw some of my relatives glance at each other, nodding, and then they started clapping. Clapping not for me, but for Sophia. The applause grew louder, followed by cheers of "so well deserved" and "Sophia is the true pride," echoing through the room. I sat there in the very place I had paid for, but I was cast out of the spotlight in my own graduation celebration. I looked around and saw my friends frozen in shock, a few of them trying to comfort me with their eyes. But the isolation was undeniable. Sophia sat proudly, smiling as though the entire event had been organized in her honor. My parents held their heads high, satisfied with their performance. And me? I sat alone, feeling as if 1,000 knives were piercing my chest. I wanted to scream, to demand why they couldn't acknowledge my efforts even just once, but my throat locked tight and my heart weighed heavy. In the end, I just took a deep breath. I lifted my gaze, letting the fire of rage and pain burn openly in my eyes. I wanted to etch that moment into my memory, to let it become a source of strength I would never lose. I said nothing. I let the silence wrap around me. Silence, but it was a vow, a wordless oath that I would never forget, and I would never again allow them to define my worth. That night ended with laughter and congratulations showered on Sophia, while I walked out the door with a bleeding heart. Yet I also knew that in that exact moment, a part of me had died. The part that still longed for my parents' love and approval. And when that part of me died, another version was born. Stronger, fiercer, and ready to face whatever waited ahead. A few months after that haunting graduation night, I had slowly fallen back into the rhythm of my daily life. Work at GreenPath kept me busy with new projects, new clients, and the steady belief that I was building a solid path of my own. And yet, just when I thought I could leave the pain behind me, the past came rushing back uninvited, crashing straight into the middle of the night. That night, the clock had just struck close to 1 o'clock in the morning. I was drifting in and out of sleep after a long day when my phone rang. On the screen appeared a name I had long stopped expecting. Dad. My heart tightened for a second, part surprise, part irritation. We hadn't spoken since the graduation dinner. And yet here he was calling me in the dead of night. Something in my gut told me this could only mean trouble. I picked up. On the other end, my father's voice came through, not arrogant, not commanding as it always had been, but laced with panic. "Rachel, are you there? We're in big trouble." I sat up, switched on the bedside lamp, and listened as his words shattered like broken glass. He explained that the family's flagship hotel in Newport had just been hit by a massive storm. The roof was badly damaged, water had poured into the grand ballroom, and the estimated repairs would cost nearly $15,000. Normally, insurance would cover most of it. But Sophia, as the newly appointed head of finances, had signed the wrong type of contract. The policy didn't include coverage for natural disasters of this scale. In other words, none of the damage would be reimbursed. I sat in silence, emotions churning inside me. This was the direct result of putting all their trust and power into Sophia, the pride of the family. My father let out a heavy sigh and then spoke again, his voice caught somewhere between authority and pleading. Rachel, you have a company. You have money. You can manage this. Help the family just this once. Sophia is young. Mistakes are natural. But if the hotel isn't repaired, Carter Hotel's reputation will collapse. Family comes first. You must help your sister this time. I tightened my grip on the phone, the memory of that graduation night flashing back in full force. The cruel words still echoed in my mind. Filthy career. No share in the inheritance. A bitter smile tugged at my lips, one so sharp it hurt even me. My voice was calm, but every word carried weight as I replied, Father, I was once cut out of the inheritance, once called the daughter chasing a filthy career, and now you want me to save the very thing you were so proud of when on that day you stood before our relatives and erased me from the family. If you need money, why not sell one of those luxury hotels? You always said they were your pride. The line went silent for a few seconds. I thought maybe he would reflect, admit at least some part of the truth. But no, his old self came roaring back, his voice sharp and furious. You really are an ungrateful child. We raised you all these years, and now when we need your help just once, you refuse. How dare you? Ungrateful. I drew in a long breath. My heart ached, but at the same time it felt colder, steadier. Softly, I answered, You chose Sophia. You declared to the entire family that I was no longer part of it. So don't call me ungrateful. I'm simply living the place you put me in. And with that, I hung up. Firm and final. After the call, I sat motionless in the quiet apartment. The only sound the steady rain tapping against the window. A strange mix of pain and relief rose in me. Pain because even in crisis, my father still saw no value in me beyond money. Relief because at last I had found the courage to speak plainly, to refuse instead of carrying yet another burden that was never mine. But I knew this wasn't the end. A family so steeped in pride and favoritism as the Carters would not easily accept rejection. That night, I closed my eyes but could not sleep. Deep down, I knew the real storm was only just beginning. The next morning, as I returned from Greenpath with files still in my hand, I froze at the sight in front of my apartment door. 3 familiar faces I least wanted to see. My father, my mother, and Sophia. They hadn't called, hadn't warned. They had simply appeared as if my home was still theirs to walk into. The moment she saw me, my mother stepped forward, her high heels striking sharply against the hallway floor as though to announce her presence. My father stood behind her, arms folded, his face dark with anger, his eyes glaring. And Sophia? She stood in the middle, her eyes red and swollen, clutching her purse tightly, looking both miserable and afraid. I sighed, unlocked the door, pushed it open and said coldly, Whatever you want to say, come in, but don't expect me to make coffee or tea. They stepped quietly into my small apartment, not wide or luxurious like the Carter mansion, but the only place where I truly felt safe. My parents glanced around, their eyes carrying a hint of disdain, while Sophia sat down on the sofa, her head bowed. My mother was the first to speak. Her voice tried to sound gentle, but I could hear the urgency pressing beneath each word. Rachel, your father already explained last night. The family is on the brink. You have a company. You have resources. And $15,000 isn't that much for you. If you don't help, the hotel will collapse. The family's assets, the honor we've built for generations, it will all be gone. She paused as if waiting for me to soften. I sat across from her, arms folded, staring directly into her eyes. A bitter wave rose inside me. Years ago, when I begged them for just a little help to continue my studies, even a few thousand was called wasteful. throwing money into something meaningless, and now $15,000 was spoken of as if it were a feather's weight, simply because it concerned Sophia. My words came slow and sharp, each one like a blade. When I needed support to keep studying, you said no. When I was mocked, called the daughter chasing a filthy career, you stayed silent. And now you dare to stand in my apartment and say $15,000 is nothing to me. I'm sorry, but I am not an open wallet for you to drain whenever you please. At that, Sophia broke down crying. Tears streamed down her face, her shoulders trembling. She lifted her gaze toward me, pleading, "Sister, I was wrong. I wasn't careful when I signed the contract. I didn't mean to. I know I dragged the hotel and our parents into this. Please just save me this once. I promise I'll never make another mistake." She reached out her hand, desperate, as if hoping I would take it. For a fleeting moment, something in me stirred, memories of us as children rushing back. But then I remembered the times she smirked in satisfaction at our parents' favoritism, the victorious gleam in her eyes whenever I was pushed aside. I drew in a long breath, fixed my gaze on her, and answered coldly, "Sophia, consequences are the price everyone must pay. Each person is responsible for their own choices. I have no obligation to save anyone here, especially after what you and our parents have done." The air in my apartment grew so tense it felt ready to explode. My father slammed his hand on the table, his voice booming like thunder. "You are nothing but ungrateful. You're just a failure we picked up and raised. Without this family, you'd be nothing. Don't forget who fed you and raised you." His words came out like venom. His face flushed red, his eyes burning into me with fury. I stayed seated, but inside me, rage erupted like fire. I remembered the nights I scrubbed floors alone, the coins I scraped together to pay tuition, the times I stood outside a store watching Sophia receive a luxury car from them. I remembered every insult, every time I was called filthy, and now they dared to say I was nothing without them. I rose to my feet, standing face to face with my father, my eyes locked on his. "You're wrong. I don't need this family to define my worth. I stood up on my own, built my company with my own hands, and finished the dream you crushed. If there's anyone here who is nothing without the Carter name, it isn't me." The room went still. My mother froze. Sophia sobbed through hiccups, and my father staggered back, too enraged to form another word. I walked to the door, swung it wide open, and motioned firmly. "Out." When they didn't move, I said again, my voice sharp and final, "I won't say it twice. Get out of my home." Slowly, reluctantly, they rose, carrying with them a humiliation they had likely never tasted before. My father muttered curses under his breath. My mother tugged Sophia's arm, and my sister turned her tear-streaked face toward me. But I felt nothing anymore. As soon as they stepped outside, I slammed the door shut. The echo thundered through the hallway like the final punctuation mark to every tie that remained. I stood there, my back against the door, my heart pounding. Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't born of regret. They were tears of release. For the first time, I had spoken every truth, claimed my power, and broken free from their control. And with that door closed, I knew I had entered a new chapter, one where I stood only on my own, leaving no space for the Carter family's poison. I thought the story ended when that door slammed shut, but I underestimated Sophia. She had never accepted failure, least of all failure at my hands. The sister she had been taught all her life was beneath her, useless. A few days after that confrontation, the storm truly began. And this time, it wouldn't be confined to four walls. It would spill out under the eyes of millions of strangers. One Monday morning, just as I arrived at the Green Path office, my assistant came rushing in with her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "Rachel, you need to see this right now." On the screen was a Facebook post from Sophia's own account. A long, emotional caption stretched across the page, paired with old family photos. In it, she spun an entirely different story. That our frail, aging parents had been cruelly turned away by me, that when they came to my door, I had heartlessly thrown them out into the storm. She painted me as a cold-blooded woman who valued money over family, who ignored the desperate pleas of her little sister asking for forgiveness. The post ended with a line dripping in sentiment. Sometimes success makes people forget their roots. Family is supposed to be everything, but to my sister, it's only a burden. Reading it, I wanted to laugh and scream all at once. The story was twisted beyond recognition, turning me into a monster. Within hours, the post had tens of thousands of shares and hundreds of furious comments. Ungrateful brat. What kind of child would be so cruel? Raised by parents only to betray them like this. The accusations piled up, each one like another knife to the chest. My hands shook as I scrolled, frozen in place, feeling as though the air had been punched out of me. But Sophia wasn't finished. On Reddit, a new account, clearly hers, posted a long novel-like tale under Reddit Family Drama. This time, the story was told from the perspective of the helpless younger sister. She cast herself as the victim while I was the ruthless success story, the heartless entrepreneur who used my company and wealth to trample over my family. Because Reddit is notorious for rallying fiercely against stories of injustice, the post shot to the top. Thousands of comments poured in, cursing me with the ugliest words imaginable. I had never felt the world turn its back so quickly. From a young entrepreneur admired by many, I had become in a single night a symbol of ingratitude. Every time I opened my phone, there were insults waiting. Hateful messages, threatening emails. Some people even tracked down the address of my company, sending handwritten letters scrawled with warnings. You will pay. I was shaken, overwhelmed. But the deepest cut of all was watching the fallout reach GreenPath, the child I had built with my own blood and tears. A major client called me, his voice hesitant. Rachel, we've seen what's been spreading online. I don't know what to believe, but our company doesn't want to get dragged into controversy. We'll have to suspend our contract. After that call, 2 more contracts were canceled. The numbers on our financial board began to plummet. I looked at my team, the people who had trusted me from the very beginning, and I felt as though I was betraying them. They didn't say a word, but the worry in their eyes was impossible to hide. Every morning when I walked into the office, I felt the weight of skeptical glances. Local newspapers started running sensational headlines like, Boston CEO accused of abandoning elderly parents. I became a talking point in coffee shops, on radio shows, and in streams of vicious online comments. The crowd didn't know the truth, and they didn't care to. For them, Sophia's sentimental story was far easier to swallow than the messy, complicated reality. At night, I lay in bed, my phone buzzing endlessly with new notifications. Every time I opened it, another storm of hatred poured out. Trash. You don't deserve to be human. Hope your company goes bankrupt. I clutched my head, tears soaking my pillow. I felt like I was drowning in a public trial where justice was defined not by facts, but by shares and furious comments. People called it social justice, but to me, it was nothing more than a mob with torches, ready to burn down anyone they decided was a monster. The world didn't know that I once knocked on doors begging for a little love and was turned away. No one knew my father once stood in front of our relatives and called my career a filthy job. No one heard him shouting, "You're just a failure we picked up." All they saw was Sophia crying, weaving her tale, and they were eager to believe it. In those days, I had to learn silence. Every rebuttal was twisted. Every attempt to explain only fueled the mob's rage. I watched GreenPath stumble, contracts slipping away, finances tightening. I watched my employees struggle to stay focused in an atmosphere so heavy it was hard to breathe. And for the first time since founding my company, I felt real fear. Not of business failure, but of losing everything to the lies of my own family. I remember sitting alone in my office late at night, the yellow lamp casting its glow over the stacks of papers on my desk. In my hand was a printed copy of Sophia's post, every word etched like a scar. I asked myself, why does she hate me so much? Why does my family not only want me to fail in their eyes, but also drag me down before the whole world? What she had done wasn't just an attack on my personal reputation. It was a direct threat to the survival of GreenPath, the company I had poured nearly all of my youth into building. I needed a clear, legal, and powerful way to fight back. And the first name that came to my mind was Rachel Kim, a college friend who had since become a lawyer specializing in business and media law. The last time I had seen Rachel Kim was at an environmental conference a few years back. At that time, she had just joined a major Boston law firm, well known for defending small businesses against defamation and unfair competition. I still remembered her joking, "If anyone ever tries to make up lies to destroy your company, just call me." I had left then, never imagining those words would one day become my lifeline. I picked up my phone, my hands trembling with both anger and desperation. The moment I heard her voice on the other end, I almost broke down. I told her everything. The Facebook post, the Reddit story, the canceled contracts, the threats. I even told her how my parents had stood by Sophia's side, silently allowing her to spread her lies. When I finished, there was a pause on the line. Then Rachel Kim's voice came firm and steady. "This is a textbook defamation case, Rachel, and we're going to fight." The very next day, I was sitting in her office, the polished wooden desk covered in documents. Rachel Kim explained everything carefully. Under Massachusetts law, any false statement that damages a person's reputation and financial stability can be grounds for defamation. She pointed out the phrases in Sophia's post. Rachel abandoned her elderly parents, say. Rachel threw her crying sister into the street. That were clearly fabricated. More importantly, those statements had directly caused GreenPath to lose contracts and suffer financial harm, something we could prove with numbers. I handed Rachel Kim the emails from clients canceling their contracts, their revenue reports showing the sudden drop right after Sophia's post went viral. I gave her printed screenshots from social media, thousands of hateful comments, and even the threatening letters sent to GreenPath. Looking over the pile of evidence, Rachel Kim nodded firmly. "We have everything we need. Sophia will pay for this." Just a few weeks later, the official lawsuit was filed in Boston court. The news spread quickly, in the opposite direction. GreenPath CEO sues younger sister for defamation. The press jumped on it again, but this time with a different tone. Some began to ask questions. Had Sophia really fabricated the story? The internet was divided, but at least I was no longer a silent target, absorbing every accusation alone. On the day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom with a heavy heart. My parents sat in the back row, their faces tense, but not a single word of greeting. Sophia wore a plain black dress, her hair loose, her makeup soft, crafted carefully to look like a victim. But I knew that beneath the fragile image was cold calculation. Her lawyer tried to argue that she had merely been expressing personal feelings, that her posts were nothing more than subjective experiences. But when Rachel Kim presented the evidence, emails from clients stating they did not want to be associated with Rachel Carter's family scandal, financial reports showing losses matching the timeline of Sophia's posts, and excerpts where Sophia had written her claims as if they were undeniable facts, the defense crumbled quickly.